beautiful thing. But it's nightmares. It's here.
Dangerous.
Deadly.
Number 1. I know kids can be odd sometimes, and after reading the threads on Reddit about the creepy things kids have said to their parents, this doesn't surprise me that much. Basically, I was waiting for a bus the other day, and I had my headphones in looking down the road towards where my bus would be arriving. And as I turned around, this girl, maybe 8 years old, was standing right next to me, staring at me. So I sort of was like, hey, you terrified me. She then just looks at me, not smiling, and says, "You're really pretty." So I'm thinking, oh, that's really sweet, slightly weird, until she says, "I'm going to rip your face off." I'm not really sure how to react when someone, let alone a child, says that to you, so I give her a weird look, pretty speechless when I see who I assume was her dad, standing at the end of the street just watching us. The little girl then sees me looking at him, and then she turns around and starts absolutely screaming her head off at him, saying that he shouldn't leave her, that he was her dad. And then the guy just turns around and runs away full speed. She then looks at me, still not smiling, not crying, not sad at all that who I assumed was her dad just ran away from her, and then she just runs after him. This was possibly one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had since that moment. Then, today, I'm about 2 to 3 suburbs away from that bus stop, and I'm just hanging out the front of my friend's apartment building having a cigarette, when I see the same little girl walking towards me. She looks at me the whole way until she's in front of me again and says, "I know you," and I just look at her, speechless. She stands in front of me for a few minutes just watching everything I do, following my hands when I move them, and then looking back at my face, staring at my feet, almost as if she's sizing me up. It was completely awkward. I didn't want to just look back at her because I felt that would be weird, but I didn't want to walk away because I'm not scared of a little kid, and I can't just leave because my friend is about to come down. So, after a few minutes, she says, "I'll be back for you," and then gives me this weird frown, narrowed eyes, slow head shake, and then slowly walks away. I really don't know what to make of this. Number 2. This is the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. So, it was a Friday morning, the day before school ended for me, and I decided that, just for the hell of it, I would stay up until 3 AM on Reddit. The last subreddit I was on before going to sleep was Reddit's Let's Not Meet. I woke up feeling strange about 5 minutes before it happened. My 8-year-old sister was sleeping and both my parents were running errands. I get out of bed and brush my teeth. Right as I finish, the doorbell rings. I go downstairs and open the door, only to find this small Indian kid, no older than 6 years old, with a demented look on his face. He has 2 little toys, one in each hand. I ask him what's wrong, but instead he just tries to push past me into the house. I gently nudge him back outside, but he keeps trying to come in. So, not knowing what to do, I just close the door on him. The doorbell starts ringing again. I ignore it for 3 minutes, but it keeps ringing, so I open the door again. The second the door opens, the kid sprints into the house past me. He sits himself down in the kitchen and starts playing with the toys he brought. I had no idea what I was supposed to do in this situation, so I just called the police. While I waited for them to come, the kid is wandering around my house, turning light switches on and off, unlocking and relocking various doors, and wandering into various rooms. The police finally came. They struggled to get the kid into their car to take him back to the station and find his parents, but they eventually did. The police found the parents, and we were informed that the little boy is extremely autistic and that he snuck out of his house before. Okay, whatever. I told my parents the whole thing. They talked to his parents were nice, and everything was taken care of. Well, that was until I went to bed at around 11 PM, only to wake up due to a nightmare about the kid. That, and my brain was telling me that it was piss time. So, I get out of bed and walk into the hallway. At the end of the dark hallway in my house, I see the Indian kid walk upstairs with the same exact fucking toys in his hands. The second he sees me, he makes a strange moaning noise. I thought I saw him drop something, and then he runs back downstairs. I hear the front door close, and after waiting about 5 minutes, I run downstairs, lock the door, and run back upstairs, and realize that I've pissed myself. When I awoke my parents, I told them what happened, and they said it was all just a bad dream. In the morning, the phone rings. When I pick it up, the parents of the little Indian kid say that he wants to talk to me. He gets on the phone, and it's the first time I've ever heard him say anything to anyone. He asks me for the toy truck he dropped last night. Yeah, it wasn't a dream. Looks like everything creepy always happens in Florida.
Number 3.
A couple of weekends ago, I was asked by my neighbour, a single father who works nights at the hospital, if I could watch his kids for a night, as his usual babysitter was out of town. Now, usually I'm not a big fan of kids, but he promised the children would be in bed by the time I arrived, and really all I had to do was watch TV and keep an ear and an eye out for them on the on-off chance that they would wake up and need something. So, I thought, fuck it, why not? He was paying well, and I had no plans aside from staying home alone and watching Netflix all night anyway. Sure enough, when I arrived, the children were in bed. He told me to help himself to the soup that was on the hob if I was hungry, left me with a list of numbers to call in case of emergency, and set off for work. With a mental note of how easy a ride this was going to be, I settled on the couch to flick through the channels on the admittedly impressive TV. Now, I was 3 episodes into a Vicar of Dibley rerun marathon, when the sound of a soft voice calling my name from behind startled me. The 4-year-old daughter, Ellie, was standing on the stairs, clutching a teddy bear and watching me. I asked her why she was out of bed, and she told me that she wanted a glass of water. I told her I would take her one up if she went back to bed, but she insisted her daddy didn't let her have drinks upstairs, and she had to come to the kitchen with me. He didn't mention anything to confirm or deny if this was true, and I kinda thought she was just looking for an excuse to stay out of bed for longer, but I didn't want to call him for something so trivial. I just told her okay, but she was to go back straight to bed as soon as she'd done drinking. She took her time with the water, and I'll admit, I felt a little impatient. I tried to rush her in a cheery way, but she ignored me, sipping away at the glass and swinging her little legs like she didn't have a care in the world. When she still wasn't finished after 10 minutes, I sighed and made myself smile at her. Come on, sweetie, drink up. You don't want to be tired tomorrow, do you? I said it in the most cheerful voice I could muster. Like I said, I'm not that good with kids. She stared at me as if she just realized I was still in the room, then drained her glass, set it down and hopped off the chair. She came over and took my hand. Why are you sad, Ronnie? The question startled me, and I crinkled my nose up in confusion. I told her I wasn't sad, I was fine, and she shook her head like the notion was kind of ridiculous. No, you're sad, but you take medication to stop you being sad. That freaked me out a little bit. I've been on antidepressants for around 18 months now, and I have absolutely no clue how the kid knew that. Granted, from several rooms in their house you can see into mine, and maybe she's seen me take the pills before, but how the hell would she know what they were for? Not knowing what to say, I assured her again I was fine and set her off to bed. She went willingly this time, and I went back to my sitcom. After a bit, the freaked out feeling wore off, and I all but forgot about the conversation. I guess I fell asleep at some point, because I woke up to Ellie standing beside the couch. The sight of her hovering over me like that almost gave me a heart attack, and I may or may not have said a bad word that made her giggle. I apologized and said she'd frightened me a bit. Next time she should wake me up. She ignored the statement and instead perched on the chair opposite, just watching me. As you can imagine, this was seriously unnerving, and I told her to go to bed. I know why you're sad now. I feel bad saying it, cause she's a really sweet little girl, but she was really freaking me the fuck out. I told her, for a third time, that I was fine and to go back to bed. It's because of the bad man, isn't it? That stopped me in my tracks. I was seriously freaked out at this point, and instead of trying to send her back to bed again, I just asked her what bad man she was talking about. What she said next made my heart stop. The bad man who hurt you when you were a little boy. Something nobody around here knows, not even my housemates, is that I was pretty badly abused by my stepfather throughout the majority of my childhood. It's the reason I've moved so far away from my mum's place. As I reached my teens and became more able to defend myself, the physical abuse decreased and made way for a lot more emotional torture, but when I was a young kid, he could be really vicious. How do you know about that? I couldn't stop myself from asking her. Her dad happens to be my doctor, and we've chatted about my medication and such over the garden fence before, so I figured she'd maybe heard us chatting about the pills. But the only people who know about the abuse are me, my counsellor, my mother, and my stepfather. There's no way on God's green earth that this kid knew anything about it. The girl told me, she said. I asked her what girl she was talking about, and she told me that it was the girl who lived under her bed. I said there was no girl under her bed, and she insisted on showing me. I went up to her room with her and found it empty, despite Ellie pointing at a corner and insisting the girl was there. She sighed deeply when I said that I couldn't see anyone. Grown-ups can never see her, she said, sounding sad about it. She stared at the corner for a second, then smiled at me. She says she can make the bad man go away if you want. At this point, I'm shitting bricks, so I told her the girl came from a dream and that she should go back to bed and sleep. With an eye roll and a sigh, she did as she was told, and I went back downstairs so I could spend the rest of the night on edge. As you can imagine, I left pretty sharpish when the dad came home. Now, after a good night's sleep and some rational thought, I chalked this up to Ellie being a creepy-ass kid with an overreactive imagination. The pills she'd heard me and her dad discuss, and she'd made a wild guess that was coincidentally right with the whole bad man situation. Except this morning, I got a phone call to say that my mum and stepdad had been in some kind of a freak car accident last night. My mum escaped with moderate injuries. My stepfather was pronounced dead at the scene.
Number 4.
I'm a part-time nanny to a 4-year-old little boy named Jason. I sit with him every weekday afternoon/evening after preschool, and most days he wants to play outside. Recently, a new family moved in next door. They have a little girl Jason's age and a boy who's no older than 8 years old. When they first moved in, the kids sort of invited themselves to Jason's birthday party and acted like they didn't know that it wasn't normal to just walk into someone's house. So, we've always gotten weird vibes from them. Since then, Jason's mum has tried to politely limit their contact with him, only allowing them in the backyard when someone is able to watch them closely and never letting them inside the house. Today, I was outside with Jason and the little boy came over to play. He was fine at first, but the longer he played, the weirder things got. It started with him just being a little rougher with Jason than he needed to be. I told him to be nice or he'd have to go home, and he calmed down. After a while, he started at it again and started trying to mess with Jason's dad's tools besides the shed. I told him to stop and come back and play on the playground. Up until this point, I thought maybe he just had problems at home or ADHD or something. But then he got real creepy. He climbed up on the playset seesaw thing and started swinging back and forth super hard and laughing the way kids do when they imitate adults. Then he started talking like a man on an infomercial and saying things like,
"Hey kids, I'm gonna teach you about suicide."
Thankfully, Jason was playing with his toy truck and not paying him any attention. I told him that Jason was only 4 years old, and that was very inappropriate to talk about, not just in front of him, but at all. He gave me a super eerie look and started telling me about videos he'd seen of cats falling and busting their heads open and other equally violent and super creepy things, all the while still laughing in the same chilling way. At this point, Jason started to notice him laughing, and I told him it was time to go inside and told the neighbor kid it was time for him to go home. He acted like I'd told him the world was ending. Jason, not really knowing what was happening, started crying about going in, but I eventually got him inside and the creepy neighbor kid back to his yard. Last I checked, he was still just sitting in his backyard, doing nothing. Needless to say, Jason and I won't be playing in the backyard for a while.
Number 5.
A quick information about me. I'm a 19-year-old male. The area I live in is okay, but surrounding areas are known to have high crime rates. So, I spend a lot of time hanging out at my friend's house. My regular group of friends tend to just end up there after whatever we've been doing individually in the day. He lives about 3 miles from me, and I usually stay there until 2 to 3 AM, and I can get a ride home with someone else there. If I have to be up early the next day, I'll leave about 11:45 PM and catch the last train. It's only 2 stops and a 10-minute walk from the station as opposed to a 45-minute walk from my friend's house. So, this would have been around February or March. I'd just left my friends and made the 2-minute walk to the train station. I'd got my timing on point because I only had to wait a few minutes for the train. So I got on the train and made it to the next station. The doors opened and a few people got off, and the doors closed. The train made the regular hisses and creaks as it was about to pull off, when it suddenly makes a loud clunk. I should explain that the rail network in my area is really unreliable, always delays and always technical problems. I heard that one of the people that ran the Twitter account that reports problems and events quit their job because it was too stressful. The company says they've been investing millions into the network, but I ain't seen much improvement. It was just my luck that the train I was on breaks down at this hour. They couldn't offer replacement buses due to the time, but offered to refund tickets. I was just annoyed that I couldn't buy a drink from the vending machine at the station since no shops would be open on my walk home. So, the walk from the station I was dropped at is about 25 minutes and pretty straightforward. I leave the station and walk straight up a long road and reach a crossroad with a church on one corner where I have 2 options. 1. Straight ahead down a long road that turns right at the end. There are streetlights, but only every 100 feet or so. One side is completely unlit. The pavement also ends at the corner of the road. 2. Turn right, walk up a hill towards a bunch of local shops and restaurants, and turn left at traffic lights and walk further. It's a longer route, but much more lit, and more cars go past it since it's a main road. Anyway, as I approach the crossroad, I look up from my phone, and I see the silhouettes of what appear to be 2 hooded children. At least I think they were children. They were around 5 foot tall. I only saw them as they ran into the area at the front of the church, which is covered by trees. There was at least 2 of them. They moved like foxes. They were fast but fluid in movement and really close to each other, so I couldn't really tell exactly how many. What really freaked me out is that I couldn't really tell where they were coming from, as they didn't come out of the other entrance to the church, which can only be accessed from the street, and has barbed wire fence behind. I considered turning right and going the one-lit way with cars going past, but I was really tired and really high, which didn't help my paranoia. I decided to walk straight on down the dark road. I'm about 6'2" and pretty strong, so I'm pretty confident. I also always have a pocket knife on my keys for if I run into any danger. So, I walk past the church and peer into the space between the walls and trees. There's no light, so I don't see anything. I keep walking and make it about 100 feet when I hear a rustling noise. I look over my shoulder and I think I see a movement in the periphery of my vision, but I wasn't sure. I got paranoid to the point where I turn off my music and keep my earphones out to listen for anything. The next time I looked over my shoulder, I definitely see one of the kids. But as I looked, they ducked into the trees lining the road, once again fluid and quick in movement. This freaks me out a bit, so I pick up my pace and make it halfway down this road. As I'm walking, I go to look over my shoulder again, but I hear a really loud snap. It came from this dark alleyway that goes all the way to the top of the hill near the shops, but backs onto an old school building that's now occasionally used for training police dogs. As I hear this noise, my skin went cold. I had that horrible shudder and could smell the blood at the back of my nose. It was too dark to see anything, but I didn't even try to look. I just kept going, walking so fast I was almost running. I kept pace until I was almost at the corner of the street, where there are more frequent streetlights and houses. When I slowed down and looked over my shoulder, I almost shit out all of my organs as I noticed one of the hooded figures standing still behind a tree, frozen still, closer than I could have anticipated. Only about 30 feet behind me, and I realized that they must have been going pretty fast to keep up with me. I pulled my keys out of my belt in case I needed a weapon, and literally sprint as fast as I can around the corner of the street and keep going until I'm on the main road. I look back as I catch my breath and don't see anything. I was about to start walking again, but I got a really weird feeling and looked back again. And there they were. 2 of them just standing in the middle of the road near the corner that I had to run past, just staring down at me from the distance. What really chilled me is that one of them was holding what looks like a metal pipe. I started power walking down the main road until I reached a turn into my neighborhood. I looked back, and there was nobody to be seen. Although I only had a 5-minute walk left to my house through my well-lit neighborhood, I couldn't bring myself to stop looking back or walk slower. I got home and couldn't get to sleep until about 5 AM. I just couldn't shake that feeling of being watched and followed by these creepy kids.
Number 6.
I was working a 12-hour overnight in a nursing home. I was on the general unit that night and a resident was close to death. I got a report when I arrived at 6 PM from the day nurse who told me that Mary's circling the drain, she'll go for you tonight. She also told me that Mary suddenly had family showing up now that she was dying. Unfortunately, this is very common. Residents live with us for years and we would never see a single family member until they were dying. Our residents were all private paying folks that could afford $8,000 to $10,000 a month for high-end nursing home care. The rooms looked like Hilton suites. When someone was close to death, family members would crawl out of the woodwork to prove how much they loved Grandma and all of her jewelry. Mary lived with us for 4 years, and I honestly didn't even know she had family. Her attorney visited regularly, but he was paid to oversee her care. I went to meet the family. There was a son and a grandson sitting in the room, and a little great-granddaughter that was about 7 to 8 years old sitting on the floor outside the room in the hallway. The adults sat in Mary's room sleeping or playing on laptops and let the little girl run around all over the unit without any supervision. It was a long night. The little girl was not afraid of the elderly residents at all. I first caught her standing in another resident's room, stroking the face of an elderly woman. I thought it was sweet she was visiting other residents, but stepped into the room and asked her to leave. I told her to please go back to her great-grandma's room and not to get into other residents' rooms. She smiled prettily and said, "I like the way her skin feels," as she left the room. Okay, so this kid is a little creepy. She goes back to Mary's room and I go about my duties. I don't see the kid for a while and it's super late, so I assume they took her home. About 1 AM, I come out of the medication room and I see this kid standing in the hallway all by herself. She's staring into another resident's room but not going in. I walked down the hallway to send her back to her great-grandma's room again. This time, I am really annoyed that her family is letting her run around at 1 AM at her age all by herself in a nursing home. As I walk up to her, before I can say anything, she smiles at me and asks, "Do you like to touch them?" Completely forgetting what I wanted to say, I just stare at her and say, "What?" She looks into the resident's room she's standing outside of and says, "The old people. Do you like touching them? When they're dead, I mean." I don't know what to say to this. It's dark and this kid is super creepy. She is way too articulate for how old she looks. When I don't reply, she asks, "Does their skin feel any different when they're dead?" Not knowing what to say to this smiling kid who asks if I like touching dead bodies, I just tell her to go back to her great-grandma's room. She glares at me and looks angrier than I thought a kid could look, but she walks to her great-grandma's room. Mary, the great-grandma, died at about 4 AM. I didn't see the little kid again, but I was afraid that I would see her in there rubbing Mary's skin. The son and grandson left before the funeral home arrived to take care of the body, but I didn't see the little girl leave with them. I assume they took her home after we had our enlightening chat about how dead people feel. It gave me the creeps that I never saw her leave though. I kept looking over my shoulder the rest of the night for that damn kid. The next morning, I told the day shift nurse, the same one from the day before, about how creepy the little kid was. She told me, "I'm glad she wasn't here on my shift. I just had the son and grandson." She swore that the little girl was not there on her shift. I guess she must have arrived after my shift started. It was as I drove home that I realized that I did not see anyone else interact with the little kid all night except for me. I never saw anyone talk to her, and I never actually walked her into Mary's room. I also did not confront her family about the kid's actions because I didn't want to seem rude complaining about their kid when their loved one was dying. The family had never mentioned the kid at any time I was in the room doing cares on Mary. Even the resident she was touching at the start of my shift never woke up as she was stroking her cheek. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well that night. Every night I worked from then on, I always kept my eye out for creepy little girls. Kids in hospitals and medical facilities still creep me out to this day. Hey guys, it's that Grim Raider here. So, thank you very much for listening through that. I appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, what are you doing? Come on, you've got to subscribe. I mean, you might as well just slap a like, just throw in a comment here and there, you know, just because you can, really. I mean, nothing's stopping you from doing it, right? No, but seriously, thank you very much for listening through. If you want to listen to more stories like this, on the screen, you can click on either video. That's the 2 previous videos, or you can go in the description and there's also a link to the previous video. There's also a playlist link which will lead you to a lot of videos very similar to this with hundreds of awesome stories like these. So yeah, with that I leave you with thank you very much, and you'll hear from me very soon.